So don't expect this series to be a consistent thing, but I've been meaning to do something like this for a while now, and it's essentially just a little thing to help you get started with making Z2i style characters, right? So this will go over the tools that I personally use. Some, little practices that I think are good for development, and basically just an overall direction of where to start. Ignore this. This is... Don't worry about it. So first and foremost, you're going to need an editor. I use Fighter Factory 3. This allows you to open the def files of characters, right? So let's say Go Tanks. And if we look at the def file, eventually, just give it a minute. Yeah, the def file, it points to a bunch of other files that are used to the character. So in files, in the folder named files, there is a file called gotanks.sff, right? So this is where we get the sprites from. This is animation data, sounds, commands, constants, and states are the actual code, right? So stuff like, your normal punches and your fucking get hit by stuff. The first thing that we're going to do, in the Hyper Dragon Ball Z Discord, if we just go down a little bit further, there's this cute little bugger. This is a template for creating Z2 style characters. We're just going to download this right quick. So the goal of this video is we're going to get a character and we're going to get them running, right? You can hit them, they can move around, nothing else, right? They're just a punching bag. For this example, we're going to take an Extreme Butoden character, and we're basically just going to plop them in, get them functional, get them playable, and just visible on the screen. Holy shit, this is taking a while. So please wake me up when I get there. It feels like I'm lost in a dream. I know in my heart that it's my time, and I already see the possibilities are never ending. I see it, and now it's all within my reach, and this possibility. I see it now, it's always been inside of me, and now I feel so free, and this possibility. So we can take any of these, it really doesn't matter. I think I am going to go with rabbits. Fuck it, I'm gonna do rabbits. Note that the process is much and such the same no matter who you pick, so it doesn't matter that much. But anyway, click that so it full screens it. I'm gonna copy paste it somewhere. I just like to use Paint because it's simple that way. Now in order to get this done correctly, what we're going to do is we're going to select this color, make the whole sheet that color. You'll see why in a second. Save it as a PNG somewhere. We're going to name this to Raditz Z2i, or whatever the name of the character that you want to make is. Maybe you want to do Beerus or Kid Buu or some shit. I don't really care. The process is much the same anyway, so it's fine. Raditz Z2i, that's what we're going to call it. So now Raditz should be openable. You should be able to just open the guy up in Fighter Factory and it should just all be there, right? There's only one problem. The template comes with all of the effects sprites and whatnot for a Z2 character, but none of the actual sprites of one, which makes sense. You're going to get a cute little program called Alfred's Spritesheet Unpacker. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select the whole thing using Control-A, and then we're going to go over here, and we're going to flip it horizontally, so all of the sprites are facing to the right. Very strange thing to do, I know, but it'll make sense in a minute. We go into the Unpacker, and we click on Paste Image in order to get all of the frames just automatically chucked out into there, right? As we can see, each individual frame is selected like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into Options. We're going to deselect Make Background Transparent. Prompt for Export folder. Everything else should be fine. So We're just going to leave it at that. We're going to select all. And we're going to export selected. I'm going to make a new folder in Alfred Spritesheet Unpacker just called Raditz EB Frames. Click OK. And we could see every single frame of that sprite sheet was just exported. So cool, what are we supposed to do with that? Here's what we're supposed to do with that. We're going to go back into our template, and we're going to duplicate a sprite. This is just for positioning purposes, we don't need to worry about it too much. And we're going to press Control P. Now, this is the fun bit. Click this button to open an image. Go into a maneuver to one of our frames. I'm going to do this. You can zoom in, and we can select the background color using this color picker. We take it and we drag it to the top left. And we press this. Insert the current palette into the images. So this will force this palette onto whatever is here. Right quick, I'm gonna make a backup folder just in case. Backups are imperative. Make them all the time. But, you know, that's a preference thing. I just highly suggest it, honestly. Anyway, we're going to select this. We're going to press Escape to get out of it. And press Control A while in this tab to add a sprite. We're going to go over to that frame that we just inserted the palette into. That's fine. Select here. Brought before axis. And boom. He's in there. Now, of course, if we look at the actual axis, you'd be too high, because where the axis is pointed, that indicates the floor. And as we can see, he's a pixel or two above there. His other foot would be really high. So, maybe something like this, maybe? That could be fine. You can save that by pressing Control S. Name Raditz. Z2i. His actual name is just Raditz. I would leave everything else just as it is, just for compatibility purposes, but you can update the version date and all that jazz. So the nice thing about the template is it comes with basically every animation you could possibly need, including a bunch of fluff, if I'm honest. But it's good enough to get the character actually working, right? So you can actually see Raditz in-game now, if you really wanted to. But there's one thing that I want to show first. If we press Control P, we can select all of the colors from, say, his leg, or his skin, or whatever. And now this is the cool bit. So, have you ever noticed that there's palettes in MUGEN, and they look all, like, organized and all that, and, like, in sequence and shit? Well, this is how you do it. So, we'll select those colors, and we will select the color in this table, and press Shift, and then another box to select every color within that range. So these four, because there are 4 colors here. And we press this in order to shoot the colors that we've selected to the left, to the right. Okay, cool. So now we just quickly repeat this process for everything else. Okay, so after being very particular and selecting basically every color that's in this palette, we select this corner, we select this corner also, then we chuck it in. Now this is the fun bit. We press Shift again, and we click this other corner, and we chuck the whole palette to the other side by pressing this, which applies the selection, like whatever selection area we have to the right, we chuck it to the left. And then we chuck the actual colors. Don't worry about it looking fucked up. That's normal. We're going to go to our transparent color on the left, and we're going to double click it, and we're going to add it to custom colors. It'll start with the upper left, then underneath it, then to the right, and then down, and so forth and so forth. We're going to select the first color that's not part of this palette, and we're going to go over to here, and we're going to set the current selection to the color that we want. So our transparent color. And we're going to do the same thing for every other row. We're going to apply this to every single color that isn't the actual palette. And then I'm going to click on Adapt Image to match the colors of the palette. So when we actually load a palette, when we load a sprite into Mugen, it's indexed. So every single pixel corresponds to a color in that table, right? That's how it gets its colors. So like say the pixel's value is, I don't know, 20. Whatever the color 20 is, that's what will display for that pixel. You know what I mean? How it actually works is a bit more complicated than that, but that's the long and short of the idea. Adapt image to the current palette. And now it doesn't look fucked up. And then we say commit image changes to the current sprite. This will not only apply our new palette to the right, but now our image actually follows those exact colors. Here's the last thing. Go into here, and I'm going to introduce you to the beautiful world of color separation. So first, we're going to see an element that we want to color separate. In this case, we're going to choose the skin. So we're going to take those colors, we're going to chuck them over here, and we're going to get a new area in this palette that we know isn't being used yet. So over here is a good example. We'll chuck them back in, and we'll shift them around to be, yeah, that kind of thing. We press the green mark here to apply our color changes, and then over here to commit changes to the current palette. If we look in the left when we go out, those colors are now there. If we open the image editor, this is the really cool bit. We can use what's known as the remap pen. We know which colors correspond to what. So this is the first skin palette, for instance. We right-click that, and then we left-click our new palette that we just made. And we do the same thing for the second color, and the third color, and the fourth color. Now this is the magic. We can make this a bit bigger, and now whenever we draw over pixels of the left-hand side, we replace it with the color on the right-hand side. So we can make this a little bit smaller just to make it a bit easier to work with. Yeah, that's fine. So we can left-click and look at that. Look at that! We can go over to the other side. We can do the same thing here right quick. And we can save it. The reason we would do this is because we go into here. Now, when we make a palette, I'll get into that in a little bit, but now when we make a palette, we can actually change the color of the hands specifically and not affect any of the other skin color, because it's just using these colors specifically. That's how color separation works. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to set our current sprite, since this is the base sprite, right? This is the main guy. We'll set it to 1, 1. That indicates that this is the default, palette to use whenever we're fucking around with things. So we're going to delete the duplicated sprite from earlier because we don't need it for positioning anymore. One last thing before we see him in game. Go into your Mugen folder, go to Data, and find Mugen Config. Then press Ctrl F in your text editor. I'm assuming it's going to be Notepad or something. It's probably the same there. We use the find command. So we say debug. And we turn debug mode, and debug keys on. The reason for that is when Mugen is running, it will show little bits of information, and specifically any errors that pop up, which is instrumental in fixing things later on. Basically, never turn it off. To get the character into the game proper, I'm going to go back. I'm going to get the name of the folder and find select.def in data. You can place it anywhere, just as long as it's over one of the empty slots or whatever. But it's best to have it closer to the actual characters, just so it's, just so it's easier to actually see, So what we're doing when we put this this name in is we're saying to Mugen, hey, in this character slot, look for in characters a folder of that name, so Raditz Z2i, and if we don't specify anything else, it looks for a def file of that same name. We can name it something like fucking, I don't know, like Chunga, right? I don't know if that's offensive somewhere. I don't know. But anyway, and in order to load that def specifically, we would say Kachunga. We would say Raditz, because that's the actual folder we want, and then Kachunga.def. So that's the actual def that we want to load from that folder. But in this instance, we don't need it. He's a bit fucked up, but I'll get into why that is in a bit. This is kind of a cool looking palette, actually. I might keep this. So when a character is loaded in Mugen, when the fight actually starts, they go to state 5900, right? This is initialization. As a matter of fact, I'm going to just say, we're going to a semicolon and then say initialization. So this is when the fight actually starts. This is what happens. And if we go down, there's a bunch of code here saying, depending on your palette number, change variable 58 to say 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. So as we can see, there was a 1-1 palette already here. And again, I'm keeping this. I'm going to make that work somehow. That looks pretty cool. So if we just delete that, save it, and then, since our debug keys are on, we could say Shift F4 to hard reload the character. And now he displays correctly. We're going to go to here, and we're going to save this palette as just test pal. We're going to add a new palette based on test pal and give it the group 1, the index 2. This, if we go back, when we press the button B, that's the palette that we're going to use, right? The value 2, it'll load the value 1, 2. So whatever 1, 2 is, that's the palette for player 2. So let's select all of these, and we'll just change the hue of it right quick. We'll just, it really doesn't matter. I don't care. Yeah, let's do that. Gonna apply that. Commit palette changes. Mugen will do this weird thing. Well, it'll apply it to a palette that's the same. It's very strange. That's why we saved it as a test pal. So load that in. Do you want to use these colors in all other instances of this palette? No. No, we don't. So now this is player 1, and this is player 2. We can save that. So now, assuming we refreshed the character, now when we fight Raditz, there we go. We got a player 2 palette.
Hi, Vsauce, Yoshin here. So there was a whole song and dance about this one bit. Seriously, it takes like a full 10 minutes for me to do it because I'm just fucking around. But anyway, here's the skinny of what I did. I selected the transparent color, and then I selected all the colors that weren't part of the main sprite, and I made them transparent as well. And then when I was done, I went to the right palette and I applied the green, that's meant to be the transparent, to that color, and I chucked it into the upper left corner of the first palette. A little confusing, I know, but the idea is that I can take that palette and I can insert it into all of the frames that were ripped by the Alfred Spritesheet Unpacker. And once that was done, I could simply add them to the SFF, and the palette that they use is perfect and clean and nice and transparent and lovely, right? And I can just apply that new palette to the one frame that isn't like that. So it's quite strange. You'll see in the vid that the initial frame, its transparency gets a little bit weird, but literally every other frame is perfectly fine. To simplify this, you could just insert this into like every single frame and just import them fresh. But the idea is that it's properly color separated and it's nice and slick and sexy and all that jazz. Anyway, sorry for the ramble.
Lovely thing is we can actually delete this palette. It should be fine. Because the other sprites use this other palette. We can just say 1, 1. And we can go over here. And we can simply go over to our 1, 1 and apply this palette to the current frame. We'll go to animations and we'll press this little blue box. This allows us to draw hitboxes. We're gonna just, for the sake of, demonstration, I'm just gonna get rid of these. Let's draw a box about here. Another one about here. How about a third one like that? Why not? Now this is the fun bit. If we go over to here, we can open the text editor for animations. Now we have CLSN2 default, right? So we've defined 3 boxes. We've set it in the header, and this is the data for that. So like the position of them, the width of them, right? But all we want to do is go to CLSN2, and after the 2, we type in default. And what this will do is it will apply these boxes essentially until we say otherwise. And we'll go to the bottom here. And we're going to paste these over and over to get the rest of the frames to the animation. And we're going to edit the second value here. This dictates which sprite to use. So we'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's probably not that many, but it's fine. Okay, we can get rid of this frame. And get rid of this frame. So, well, hey, he's moving. I mean, not very well, but he's moving. Grab this, flip him back. Yeah, we could definitely do better than this, but this is fine for now. So now if we save this and we reload the character again by pressing Shift F4, he has boxes and he animates. So now you can... Oh, there's no default. Okay. But hey, he's there. You can push up against him, So cool, he's there. We can push up against him. He's got a second palette. We have the sprites basically ready to go. Cool. Now what? The first thing I would do is if we go into here, we look for them. We're going to implement get hits first and foremost. Now there's a ton of get hit frames here, but what we're going to focus on is we're going to grab these 5, and we're going to label them 5,000 and 0. We'll get into the specifics in a bit. Same kind of story as before, we want to align them so that when we actually hit Reddits, it doesn't look really fucking weird. Keep in mind, these are extreme Butoden sprites, so there's only so much you can do, you know? So now we're going to look up MUGEN Sprite Standard. And this is essentially the essential sprites that are needed in order to get a character up and running. So the first thing we're going to focus on are the first 3 strengths of get hit, right? Or at least they're meant to represent that. So when you're hit by a light attack, a medium attack, and a heavy attack. Don't worry about like the 5001 and all of that. It looks complex, but I promise you it's not as hard as you think. So this one is our obvious 0. This one looks like a good 10. And this looks like a good 20. We'll say that's 21. And the reason for that is we can use other sprites like 21 for displaying like, you know, him returning to idle from getting hit from something. But as long as those free frames are in there, we're fine. They're usually used for stuff like custom states and the like, you know? So we're going to go into our animation file and press Ctrl F and look up 5,000. So when you get hit by an attack, this is the frame or animation that plays. But before we do that, we're going to go back to here and we're going to grab our hurt boxes from the idle animation. We're going to go back to 5,000 and we're going to pump them in there. The reason for that is HTBZ characters do the same kind of thing. Every normal get hit animation it uses the same boxes as the idle animation. So they might not be the prettiest things in the world, but assuming we didn't fuck it up. Oh, right, we didn't reload it. We can actually hit them with high attacks. Again, the important thing, every single standing hit animation uses the same boxes. This is so things are just consistent and clean and nice and sweet and sexy, you know? Go back. We're going to press Ctrl N to make a new project, and then Ctrl I in the Sprite tab, because we're going to make 5001 and 5002 really quickly. So we're going to grab the group 5000. Get rid of all the sprites that aren't 0, 10, and 20. So we don't need them. 5001 and 5002 are the same kind of, I say by accident, compulsive habit, are the same type of thing as 5000, 0, 10, and 20. But instead of being aligned at the base of the character, they're aligned at the middle and the head. Usually for stuff like getting punched in the stomach or whatever is for 5001. 5002 is for stuff like, oh, you get grabbed in the head. Like Broly does that, for instance. So we're going to press Ctrl I in our character again. We're going to go to our project. Just say Control. We'll just grab them all. Renumber. Add 1. Those free sprites are in. 5000, 0, 10, 20. Nice. So we just align them to be more or less by the center. We do the same thing again. We number, add 2. And instead, we position them by the head. If you ever don't like where a sprite is in the SFF, like what I just did, we can go into here, and we can say View Organizer. We can go to the sprites that we want to move. So for instance, I want to move these down 1, 1. So now they're after all the regular standing frames. Yeah! These are the same kind of thing, but low is usually used for stuff like, oh, you're hit by a low kick, or maybe a punch to the stomach, or something like that. And the idea is the same. Just align them by the mid for, for custom stuff, and the head for 5012. Honestly, the rest of these are fairly simple to follow. They're more or less just variations on what we just did, So yeah, we've got a basic character up and running. You can hit them. They have custom palettes. You've seen how color separation works. Just basic, getting started. Code is its own bag of worms, to be honest, but for the moment, I think this is a decent starting point. If you have any questions that aren't, easily Googleable, then let me know, and I'll do my best to answer. Hope you found this useful. Have a good day.